Hello, everyone. It's Donny Singe here, and welcome to the 18th episode of the NORMLESS podcast.
Now, we were just talking before we came on air about some of the work you're doing yesterday at the Harbour Devils, teaching some of the coaches there on culture and attitude. That was my junior rugby league club, so back some fond memories for me. But what were you doing there yesterday? Talk to us.
Yeah, look, I obviously with all my years in the NRL, I actually started in the junior league. So all those clubs is where I cut my teeth when I came from union into rugby league. So it's always a pleasure to get back to the grassroots and to work with all those individuals and really dedicated coaches and trainers, men and women who are just working with our children and building the game. So I was able to go in there, sit down, put a little bit across the table about myself, about a little bit about NRL, a little bit about culture and what we believe that was, and the disciplines and the behaviors, that could holistically affect and build a club. And then literally I just open up the floor and let the coaches ask me about things that are really relevant to them with where they're training and their environment and the resources that they have. So always an enjoyable night, and it really is very satisfying for me to engage with those men and women because I know how hard they work.
And I think one of the really fondest memories for me in terms of my experiences with you is when I was at St. Augustine's College. I miss under Mr. Gray's class there in year 10, physical activity and sports studies. And I remember, we're rolling into to the in there in Narrabeen, in the Institute of Sport. And, you provided us a bit of a talk on self-development and standards. And you had a really infectious energy. And I know that because my parents actually met under your kind of guys there at the gym at Freshwater Health and Fitness there. And you've really been known as that big ball of energy. So,
energy is like they say, it's contagious. And the beauty of energy and what I love, when I'm working with people is we've all got it. We've all got it. We just got to, is how we tap into it. And then of course how we contain it. So the better you are at your job and what you're doing, that saves you a tremendous amount of trouble as such. If you can put that energy into the job and then at the same time use it for encouraging everybody around you to buy into what you're doing, or throw some of that energy to help somebody do what they're doing. But I'm sure those. Geez, you'd be giving away my age if you start talking about when you're at school and how long I was there at the Seagulls, at the time. Yeah.
But I think I was listening to the Sports Grad podcast recently, and they were talking a bit about, and you were talking a little bit about when you were starting. The physiology, the sports science. That's your bread and butter. But I think what kind of separated you apart from a lot of the other coaches at the time was that ability to galvanize your team, get people to listen to you, take notice. And I think that's something that you've kind of reiterated throughout a lot of your resources that I've read through and kind of the podcasts I've listened to, is that's kind of what a lot of people know you for, is your ability. And we'll talk about that when we get into your time over in Japan. When you had only minimal vocabulary or language.
Only training. I only had training vocabulary, but that was enough.
Say hello. And so talk us back to, obviously, everyone who knows the Seagulls, whether they know your name, I think they would recognize you in that fluoro orange vest running out behind the boys on the field there. Take us back to the late 2000s. Obviously, probably we could refer to it as the one of the golden eras for the Seagulls, that decade there, which you were fortunate enough to be a part of. Take us back to that time.
Yeah, look, I was fortunate to be a part of that, and obviously, the coaching crew that I was with were outstanding. I had you obviously Des and Jeff, Dennis Moore, but back then we also had Crusher, we had Blocker, we had all these other assortment of crazy names. We had Ben Kennedy as a captain. We had the Ox, Michael Monaghan. Then out there running the ball, we had Kaidi, we had Joe Nulliver, we had the Stewart brothers.
What
Then we had
now?
Matty Ballard, Mr. Good Looking, Mr. Too Good Looking, actually, and he's doing fantastic now, as we always expected about him to go far in coaching, and there he is at the Broncos right now, leading the way. And then we had our Anthony Watmos, who were just anomalies, but wonderful, wonderful beasts and characters that and our Stevie Maddai. So yeah, you're quite right. I was really fortunate to have not only an outstanding performance team and support around me, with so many talented coaches, and then also the technical side of it. Des had this great this great bunch of coaches who knew their stuff and played the game. But we had this we actually had this team of footballers, and one of the favorite things is I always get pulled up a bit, and in particular by players now, other players from other clubs, and they always say to me, geez, in that time, you guys were always known as these, big drinkers and parties, and a bit loose and mad and wild, and great footballers, And I said, yeah, I said, look, and I think at the time, not personally me and Des, but the team, possibly, But I said to them, you just got to put it around the right way, mate. They were great footballers first. It was always about the work first. What happened over here, if that's how they balance themselves out, and as we all know, right through the game, right through every sport now, with social medias and the way that information is very quickly shared, there's a lot of things that have, calmed down. Not to say that everything that they were doing behind closed doors was not acceptable, but judgment is a human character that is absolutely rife in today's world. But we just had everything there to create a champion culture. And one of the things that we had, which was even more powerful than what we internally had, was the competition itself. Back in those days, back then, the Warriors, Souths, Storm, Penrith, everybody was tough. Sharks, everybody, Canberra, everybody was tough. And that entire competition, right through that decade, we had to bash each other to take the spoils of the day. And I think a lot of people sometimes look at teams, great teams, and they look at the errors that they have. And rightfully, and I love it. The bulk of the 2000s belong to Storm and belong to us. However, every other team in that comp could have snatched at any time, right from the Tigers and teams that are struggling now, right through. And I think that's something when people look back on their teams, and how great they were, what were they fighting against? What was coming up every week? Because that's what makes the competition. So as much as I like to say, we did good things and came away with great results, we were men amongst men. We were in a tough competition, very high caliber and quality of competition, and all those athletes. You could go through all the teams and pull out athletes who were very, very similar to ours, and some better. But at the end of the day, our men had, as you said earlier, galvanized. Our coaching crew had galvanized. When you came to us, you joined a culture. We didn't talk about culture too much because we had a culture. A lot like the Queenslanders right now. You go up there, you don't go up there and they don't have meetings about culture. They are a culture. When you go there, you join their culture. And that's what we had then. So not at all to say anything against the wonderful competition that's going now, but I would have to say that a percentage of the success that we had in those years was due to the bar of the entire competition being so high.
And you talked a little bit about the Storm and Manly, and we had that really intense rivalry, and we still do. But for that block of time, I think one thing that we kind of forget at times is the fact that the Storm actually were stripped of their titles in 2007. Yeah. And so in 2008, we went to the grand final there and won 40-0, which was the biggest winning margin by a team in NRL grand final history, the most points scored in a grand final since 1951 by the Rabbitohs. And you think in that time, back to 1950, how much sports science, technology, the principles of training, the physiology of the body, and the way NRL has built into a business. it's quite remarkable feat to against a team that's, breaching the salary cap. So they've got, and you think about that, how at the time, did that dawn on you guys just to how remarkable, those couple of years there were for you guys?
Yeah, look, it probably hasn't, because when you're in it, you're in it. And like I said, there's a lot of humility at that end of the game, internally within clubs. And a lot of those men and women who were serving in the units at that time to produce those sides, they're still here in the game now. And I would say that at the time, you're sort of just you're just in the trenches, and you recognize the wonderful achievement of having 26 to 28 rounds in finals, and then coming out at the top of that. And you mentioned Storm, and Storm to me they've always been my benchmark, quite simply because I know the men down there and the women who run those units, who are in charge, and I know who they are, and they've just continued to be those people, and that's why that club, even with the stars moving away, that's why they're just so they're so it's like fiber in them. Most of the other clubs, and you can see it in Penrith now too, most of the other clubs are still building that. But to answer that question, really, when we have the other day, I was really fortunate to be invited along to a Golden Eagles Day, which is the old boys. And it's probably not until times like that, and I'm walking along, man, there's Owen Cunningham, strolling along beside me, puts his hand out, "G'day, Donny." And I'm looking at him thinking, and he's just so casual. And yet that's Owen Cunningham, And I've got Spud, and I've got all these champions all walking around me, just being part. And I suppose that's when you say to yourself, you were part of 4 grand finals, and you were part of 2 premiership wins, and then it dawns on you. But the score never does, because we were smiled upon by the gods, and those guys really worked hard. The year before, Alex Corvo, who was my counterpart at Storm, he had to put his arms around me to console me, because it was like, there's nothing, the feeling when you lose one is just, it's so, just for you in that place. It's really, my wife had to tell me to snap out of it. Otherwise, you're gone, and because I was just bringing the whole world down, for a while, until I could put a process back together and start doing things that showed me I was getting back on track. But a year later, then it was my turn. But so you remember the win, but I don't know if many guys remember the score. I know the fans do.
Yeah. I remember sitting on the bus. I was at the game on the way home. 40-0. 40-0. I came home, lost my voice. That was
And we're just like we got it. Yeah. We won it. We won it. I honestly don't think you'll ever hear a player say anything about 40-0.
Yeah.
But it's the real honor, especially against a competition like that. That's what we remember the most, is the win. Same with the Warriors. Yeah.
And I think in life we talk a lot about the hardships, the triumphs, the good, the bad, and you have to go through that struggle or that challenging time to really soak up and enjoy the fruits of your labor and the success that you enjoyed over those years. And I think you started back in 2003 with the just after the Northern Eagles had the demerger had occurred, and the North Sydney Bears and the Eagles had part ways, and it was the Sea Eagles had been reinstated, and this was a time when there wasn't too much in the way of success for the club, and you really had your opportunity to lay the foundations of what you wanted to do with your crop of players then. Tell us a bit about those early years when you might have been struggling a little bit. How were things? And I know in that first couple of years you had a really strong conversation with Ben Kennedy about, and he sort of taught you a lot about how you directed feedback and managed your players, and that really helped you sort of lay the groundwork in terms of your communication and relationship with the players.
Yeah, look, that's probably one of the biggest. I think that's one of the biggest parts of my success in coaching was I've always had great captains, really great captains and senior players, from Ben to Ox to even to Michael Monaghan to all those guys right through to Jamie Lyon and Kingy. And the thing is that, and of course, Chairs Daly Cherry. But the thing is that Ben, I reckon what I noticed the most about Ben is that until then I was a really strict trainer. I'm ex-military. I'm always leading by example. I'm a midget, and they're always after me. And I'm fit and strong and energetic. So we used to go on these runs, and I never run with the pack. I go from front to back, front to back, front to back. Then I'd run ahead, hide, jump out, whatever. I was just, and any of these players will tell you this, And I was at Ox's birthday the other day, and I was with Steve Bell. And Bell recalls the story where I ran ahead one day, and I used to love just running up there and then just jumping out of the bushes just to, anyway, I don't know what was wrong with me, but I'm hiding behind a bank one day, right? And I think they're nearly here. And I poked my head up, but just as I poked my head up and it was just by pure coincidence, Bally's launched this massive rock, and it's literally just missed my head. And that poor guy, his eyes nearly bugged out. But we talked about it the other day because it was fun. It was close, but it was during a time when I was torturing them, And back in those years, we worked incredibly hard physically. That was Des's mantra, fitness, 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 then darkness, 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 then decisions, 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 and then you're okay. And so we would just push and push and push these guys, not till they broke, but till they wanted to break, and then we'd pull them back, let them regenerate, and then boom, take them back there again. And what happened was one day, really big change for me was, and I'm a real stickler, man, it's on. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. We were in the gym, and Ben Kennedy walks in. He's a beast of a man, big, bald-headed monster man, And he says to me, he walks in, he goes, "Oh, Donny," he goes, "I'm gone, mate. I'm gone." And I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Mate, I'm roasted. I got cooked out there because our field sessions were just all root and bash, And he says, and he's running up against, Sol and Kylie Luluai and all these big bodies always, So he says to me, "Listen, I won't get through this gym session." And then he says to me, "Mate, can I just go? And then and I'll ring you and we'll do something early in the morning. I'll make up for it." And I'm like, "What'd you just say?"
About?
And I'm like, "What the hell?" And I'm sitting there, and I can hear my own heart rate going boom, boom, boom. And I'm thinking, what the hell are you talking about? I've never had this before. But while I'm doing that, I'm looking at him, right? The guy's 6 foot and enough, thick set, ex-kangaroo. Well, you're never really an ex, so kangaroo, wallaby, premiership winner, Canberra. He's a tough guy, man. He's a hard man. I've just watched him train, always leading training, always giving the best of what he can. So in that one moment, I have to make a decision. I can either say to him, "No way, man, just get in there." And he would have gone in. He would have gone in and trained. Or I could look at him and respect who he is and think to myself, okay, he knows his body. He never shirks. He's not looking for a shortcut. He's telling me, "I don't have anything for you right now because you just took it. I'm older. I'm an older body. Is there any chance you'll let me recover, rejuvenate, and I'll come back? I promise I'll come back hard tomorrow." So in that moment, thank God I made the right decision. I looked at him and I said, "Okay," I said, "do me a favor." I said, because it's probably from my military days, I always work in this chain of command, always have. And I said to him, I can give you that, but you have to clear it with Des. And that's a test for him too. Because, that's the big one, is going to see someone like Des and say, so I said to him, you go to the office now. I'll be back at training. You tell Des that I have said I am okay and I understand and I can see the benefit in what you're doing. And I'll see you tomorrow morning. And if Des says you can go, you can go. I said, but he's the boss, mate. So only one person can let anyone out of training. That's always been my rule. It's always a head coach. No one gets days off. And off he went. And then obviously, Des, because Des is a player of the same caliber. So Des made the decision. Well, 9:30 that night, Donny, I'll meet you. There goes my phone. I'll meet you. And we're down at Manly Oval training in the morning. And he's just gunning it. And what that really taught me a lot about looking at this was before we were pulling all the DNA and all the GPS and volumes and loads and intensities and historical evidence and seasons. It was before we were pulling all that data, you know, and the RLPA talking about days off here and this over here. This is way before that. Yeah, it was a decision that I got such a positive result out of. And then he led the way for me in that area. So if somebody else was looking, you know, for something out of me, which wasn't work, he was the guy who said, don't play. If you go in there, you better have a really legitimate reason if you go and talk to this guy, because I'd won Ben. So once I won Ben, then obviously, and I had, you know, Menzies and I had older players coming in then. The rest is history. They showed that if we treat them, you know, their bodies, we're going to get longevity out of them, you know, and mentally too. So that's Ben. You know, he really helped me turn a corner. I hate to think what would have happened if I'd gone the other way.
Yeah,
He would have just gone and trained, but we would not have had that connection, because he never abused it either. He never looked for an easy way out. Yeah.
I think that success leaves clues, doesn't it? And do you think that level of autonomy that the players had, we talked a little bit at the start of the podcast about how this group may have been known for their, you know, going out and having a drink and having their fun. But when we look at clubs in the past, maybe, for instance, Josh Dugan, Blake Ferguson come to mind, you know, the booze bans or the drinking bans that were placed on them. And I think, you know, just like when we're young kids and mum tells us to do something and we don't do it, we do the opposite, you know, we're disobedient. And I think there's that element of when you provide a bit of autonomy, and I'm probably sure you teach a lot of professionals these days, which we'll talk about a bit later in the podcast, but, you know, having a bit of balance, a work-life balance is something, one of those hot topics that everyone likes to talk about, you know, with work from home these days. But footballers, just like any other professionals, need a bit of balance, don't they? And I think when you give them that little bit of autonomy, and you would be able to talk to this more so than me, but helps get buy-in from the players, doesn't it? And that's just what happens there with Ben Kennedy.
I think the buy-in comes with trust, and trust comes from, you know, from you as a person and how consistent you are. And so we were always very consistent as a coaching crew on how we reacted to things, responded to things, how we delivered things, how things affected us, and how we even dealt with things in a disciplinary sort of way. So the players were always knew where we stood, or where they stood with us. And that's really important if you want to, you know, really encourage them to buy into what you're doing. But with what you're saying about, you know, that whole group of players and behavioral aspects, again, that was part of culture. And wait, it's a bit of a mantra now that when you talk to people about making gains, changing things, getting forward, progressive, and dealing with historical things, you often talk about behavior. You know, is the behavior that you are exhibiting or the actions that you are doing now leading you to that outcome that you want?
Yeah.
And so we could always go back to that with players. If you want to be winners, if you want to be, you know, the best at what we're doing, is this the type of behavior that's leading you to that? Now, yes, you can go off and relax, but now you're starting to talk about, you know, measuring your levels. Yeah, measuring your levels of where you are. And I think players are getting better and better at that. But one of the things I would say is, don't for one moment, you know, anyone ever even try to imagine, if you haven't played NRL and you're not there, don't even try to think what one of their days is like physically and mentally, and how much depletion occurs, because you won't be able to do it unless you're a soldier or you're, you know, but doing it 26, even then, you know, these guys, they train for excellence day in, day out, 7 days a week to 6 days a week in a preseason, which is 3 months. And then they're on 5 days, 4 days a week. And then they've got 1 day where they literally deplete every single energy system they've got. They're burnt, man. But we're getting better and better at how we recover that and moving them away from some of the things that aren't so healthy and good for them, and also the long term with their mental health. Yeah. But you know what? They're getting better and better at it, because if you think of the availability of information now that's out there to the world about anyone at any time, then really the news stories around bad boys is actually about that big.
Yeah.
I'm going to turn this light on for a second so that you can see me,
Sure thing.
because I'm dark and I'll disappear.
So, Donny, what we're going to talk about next, mate, is taking a step back to when you were coaching Japanese rugby overseas. So we were talking a little bit about how you know, you only had a limited amount of language that you knew. So I think it was just a handful of those essential terms that would allow you to direct the players around the field during training. And I think they referred to you as Oni Donny, Devil Donny.
Yeah. Oni Donny, Devil Donny, yeah. Oni Donny San. They've always got good manners. Mr. Devil Donny, yeah.
And so the sheet of paper, so you didn't even know how to say hello or any greetings, good night, good morning.
You know what? I was such a intense bugger that when I got that contract and they said to me, "Look, we're gonna we're gonna give you a Japanese teacher, you know, to come away and come around and teach you." And this lovely tiny Japanese woman turned up, you know, and she's got her books and she sits down and, you know, hajime mashita, you know, which is the first time you're meeting. I can remember most of it. I haven't been back in Japan for a long time, but you know, and she's sitting there looking at me, and I've just got this piece of paper and I just slid it across, and I just said, "I just want to learn these, please." And she's like, "Oh, well, you know," like, and I went, and she's looking at it, you know, and it's got left, right, line up, no good, faster, more, 1 to 10, 1 to 10 minutes, 1 to 10, you know, like half an hour, all these terms, you know, seconds. You know, I still remember them. Pun, fun were the minutes, and byo was the seconds. The swear words, you know, you had to, you know, and she was like, "What is this?" But she taught me them. And what happened was I got to Japan and I did my first job. And I remember going out to meet the team. And you're right, you know, I had to learn all the real subtleties in the you know, and I just hit them, man. I hit them on the field, you know, and I just, yeah, some of the one of the words I kept getting wrong was shita, and shita means down, but shita means tongue. If you split it, so I'd be yelling out shita shita, thinking it was shita, and so they'd be like, "What's he doing? You stick their tongue out, you know?" So, all right, now we're on. And so I had a lot of fun with that. But the thing was, because I could do all of the commands training in the gym and on the field, they thought I could speak Japanese, but obviously I couldn't. Yeah. And then, but what that did for me commercially was I suddenly became really in demand all around Japan.
Yep.
To go and work, because everyone was saying, "Oh, we've got this elite rugby union performance coach, and he can speak Japanese." We couldn't, but he could train them. So yeah, that's that. You know, my conversation Japanese is still rubbish. That you know.
So you look at Eddie Jones as well. I think he went, and there was talk about him potentially coming back, I think, to coach Manly. I know it's Anthony.
Yeah, look, at the moment, but Eddie was coaching Suntory when I was originally in the 90s. And Eddie back then, Eddie was massive then. Back in Japan. Like wherever he turned up, we'd go to these. See, like the university games were massive, like thousands of people, thousands, you know, at a university match. And then the crowd would make a noise, and that's because they recognized Eddie had walked in. Yeah, we're talking about the end of the 90s, and he'd walk in, and they all knew him. Yeah, but he was he was coaching Suntory, and Suntory were reigning supreme amongst the big company teams.
And so do you think, Donny, and you could probably pose this question to him as well, but in terms of going from Australia, speaking English, I know you originally grown up in New Zealand, and we'll talk a lot about your you know, family history and you know, your time in the Navy.
You're going to have to break this podcast into about 9 parts.
I think there's more than 9 parts. I think there's about 900. We could go for 9 hours, but I think one thing that wanted to ask you about was in terms of your communication. You know, initially when you were talking about that Ben Kennedy story and how, you know, he said he was basically said to you, "I'm fucked. I can't do anything this session." In that moment, reading his body language and making that split-second decision about, you know, whether you're going to let him come back in the morning, have a rest in the afternoon, going over to Japan where you only had limited vocabulary, and you had to, direct these players around the field. Obviously, in a gym setting, when you're doing, your key compound lifts and movements in the gym, did you use a lot of priming demonstrations? Was it all about body language? You learned to read players. Was this something you had to develop?
Yeah, look, any of the players probably pre Bulldogs. So I went to the Bulldogs in 2016 when Jeff and I came out of the. I went to the Bulldogs 2016, and that's when I turned 50. And 2016, pre 2016, I led. So I did everything with the men. I run, train, whatever it was. So I was always a demonstration in there, working with them. After those years, a few things sort of happened along the way, and I really toned myself down, and even I switched to a more, dare I say it, but a little bit more intellectually sort of engaged with what was happening, and I stepped a bit deeper into the performance side of things as opposed to the coaching side of things. But in Japan, I was very capable of stepping out. This is what we're doing. Follow me, blah blah blah. And then with my language, reading them, looking at them, I've always been very. I like to think I've always been very good at reading people and really being able to connect. And they were skills that definitely I even learned in the military. And then as all through my years, I think that's been one of the reasons I've never had to really put a CV out. In fact, all of my professional work right up to Tennis Australia or anywhere has all been through word of mouth and people. So, leading by example. They say there's a bit of a coaching. I might get the stats wrong, but I'll try and do the math. But there's a bit of a coaching philosophy around communicating, and they say that we gain around 7% of something essence when someone's speaking. Then they say that increases to around 35, might be 38% by the way they say it. And then they say, and then I think, I don't know, whatever's left, 50 something, 55% is that's then how you actually act. So saying 7%, how you say it, up there 33, and then this or 32, and then this 58, 50, whatever I said was 55 or whatever is about how you act. And I really believe that. So I'm a big believer in, if I'm trying to get the best out of you, I don't have to be a saint, but whenever someone refers to me or you see me or someone talks about me, there should be traits of who you expect me to be or who I've led you to believe I am. You should hear those and see those. And that's what cements
reputation.
Reputation, and that's what makes it easier for you to buy into the things or trust what I say.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know. This is a bit roundabout. I sort of couldn't quite get that one out there, but
I think I know what you're saying there. And you're in the Sports Grad podcast, you're talking a little bit about how footy is a bit of a men's club. It is a bit of a boys' club. But if you can develop the skills, and get your physiology down pat, and come into an organization and learn how to communicate, how to lead by example, how to manage and direct troops around the paddock. I think you kind of, once you develop those skills, you're welcome to join the club. And when you're in the club, that's when you have your opportunity to earn your stripes.
Yeah. Look, and that's what I mean. I had a great day today. I had to go out and do some stuff, and I ended up in Balmore. So I sat down with Rubes and coaches and guys that I've worked with, or gone up against with other clubs. And then, the Dolphins are here and they're up, up training at a gym that I was able to help, them with fine. But then I've got my own. So you really, it's not name dropping, but, like guys like David Boyle, all these sorts of people from your past that you've connected with, who you've shown some sense of competency and responsibility and accountability. And what happens is, I know they say, well, it's who you know, not what you know, but really it's who you trust. And there are lots of guys out there, and thankfully for me, when I left the NRL, there were plenty of people out there, and I still call it Civvy Street because I'm not part of an organisation, but who are willing to take you on because they know who you are, they trust what you are, and they know you'll deliver, or they know you'll bring something positive. And that's why I really, really encourage people, especially the students that I work with now when it comes to work experience or internships. I say to them, be planned really well, show your skills, ask your questions, don't be annoying, don't be invasive, but be inquisitive and be curious because, this is what's going to start connecting you. And, always looking to see what's next. What can I do? How can I help? And then, most importantly, if you're given something to do, get that down pat, get that down really pat and perfect, and then ask for the next thing.
Yes.
Don't go trying to do 10 things at once. And I think that's I like that. I used to give, my guys would get like a type of task book, or I would be signing things off, not to be officious, but I felt satisfied that they had learned something. And it's really nice for me now when I go out there and like some of the guys that worked with me, as my sports science or speed or whatever, they'd all go on to clubs and start kicking my ass in the last 4 years, and and even now in 3 of the clubs, guys that worked with me or worked within my departments, and 2 of them are heads of performance now, and they're going great, and not because of me, but because they were able to, be themselves and bring their best to the front. So there's a lot to be said about how you interact, understand body language, know your environments. Very, very, put it in a simple way. Your self-awareness and your situational awareness is really, really a great skill to have. Yeah.
And one of those men who entrusted you in the early days was none other than Desi. And
Yeah.
that brings you back to a time when, after Japan, this was late in the 90s, you'd come back to Australia and you got your first kind of start in rugby league with the Beacon Hill Bears.
Yeah. The junior leagues, yeah.
Yeah, and that was kind of the first taste of league. What did you notice differently between, the physical demands of league versus union, and what that taught you about, heading into your time with the Seagulls?
Yeah. You know what? I didn't really notice a big shift until I went to NRL, but because I came from Manly Union, and at that time, I had guys like Willie Offengowie.
Yep.
I had Damien Cummins. I had Simon Fenn. I had guys who were playing at New South Wales level. They were good athletes. They were strong and powerful.
Yep.
The difference was when I went to league, and I went to the A grade, they were just a different kind of beast in terms of acceleration, speed, demand, body weight, a lot more collisions. But I'll tell you, I'll never forget the day when Des said to me, I'm going to take you on as my as my trainer for reserve grade. And there was me and Des, Jason Lussick, and Cliffy Lyon. And I remember coming into the gym, right, and he said, right, we're just got to set this up and then we're going to go and sort this stuff out. So Des was, sort of showing me the ropes of the difference. Des only took me on because he knew I was as mad as him. I just wanted to hurt people. I just wanted to, and the best advice that he ever gave to me, because I just wanted to take over, I said, mate, just give them to me. Give them to me, mate. I'll fucking bend them. Just give them to me.
Donny.
Oh, mate, Donny, yeah. And hey, these guys would have eaten me. This was your Hoppers and like there were
Yep.
Nick Kusefs and that. They were all like, man. Anyway, he stops me and he goes, listen, you're going to work with me for a year. He goes, because they're different animals. They're not soldiers. They're different animals. We're going to work together for a year. He goes, and then we'll see where we go from there. And we did that. But anyway, we did the session, right? And he said to me, right, and he lines everyone up. And he goes, yep, 100 chins, get in your lines. So all the boys are in lines now, right? This is Hopawade and all that, and they're all lined up. And it goes all this stuff. They're all lined up. And go. And then he says to me, oh, I want to show you this thing. And we walk away, right? And we're walking away and we're doing this. We're looking at, and then I'd get up and say, oh, I'm going to go and have a look. And he looks at me and he goes, look at what? I said, well, I want to go around there and make sure they do those chins, And he goes, don't worry about them, mate. And I said, no. So I walk back around there. and this guy's doubled over in that, but there's a guy, he's bang, bang, drops down, next one steps up, boom. And to me, not that my rugby union athletes didn't do this, but it was a real eye-opener to me that we just left these guys alone. And the program was there, and they were just like, guys were just bent over. They'd had enough, but they had like 30 to go. And the other boys were like, get them done. Come on, get them done. And man, I was at home. Man, when I felt that, it was like, gee, Donny, Singe, you're in the right place. That was the closest I felt coming back to the military. Not that I wanted to go back there, but it was close, man. And I'll never forget that. And that was me, man. I was hooked from that day. And that particular athlete, like I say, I stress again, different game, different demands. But that league athlete, man, they are just nuggets of muscle, and you can just push them and deplete them and empty them out, get them to refuel. In the early days, I couldn't get anyone off the field. I would have to threaten, cajole, I don't know, spike the drink, anything to try and get them off, because they just weren't leaving. They just weren't leaving, And now, obviously, the rules are good because someone else helps you with that. But even then, they just that was my introduction. That one, I'll never forget that session. It sticks with me all the time. Just the way all those boys were lined up, just smacking the crap out of those chin-ups. And they were big boys too. And the accountability they put on each other to get every single man to complete the set.
And, we look at it over the years. So 2015, 2017, you transitioned to the Bulldogs from Manly.
Yep.
And
Yep.
We look back through what happened there, and Desi went, you followed him, Will Hopewadi came across. There was one stage where Kieran Foran was there, similar to what you're seeing now with Kickow and all the Panthers players, the Bulldogs. And what do you think it was about Des and that coaching group there that you had that kind of won the players over and ultimately established that really, really strong rapport you had with them?
Look, it was definitely the dynamic of that crew. So just to clear up, so Des left in 2011 at the end, but I didn't. I stayed with Jeff. So yep. Des went 2012. He was with the Bulldogs. Jeff and I stayed on till 2015 with Manly, and we played that grand final. We had that grand final against the Roosters. So that big split, and yeah, you're right. There was a really powerful coaching dynamic built, but it was a tough coaching crew. Like we were really hard buggers. We were hard buggers, and it was almost like when Des left, then there was me, the physio, Andre, and Rossi, the head trainer, and Jeff Tuvey himself, and we were sort of the core that was left, and we brought in some new coaches. Des took a couple of coaches over there, but he still had a Bulldogs crew. So there was this real dynamic change. I think we were really fortunate because Jeff Tuvey was such a big part of the entire coaching crew of Des. So whilst we lost, perhaps that Des, we were able to get Jeff as a coach. And then Des was over there, but he'd also lost a little bit too in us. And even though they had 2 grand finals and success, they did things a little bit differently towards the back end. And we're the same as we went into Roosters. Maybe if we'd all been together, maybe we could have all pulled off either. But that success those years, again, I'm going to use Storm as a great example. You've got people over there like of course Bellamy, but then you've got Frank Panisi. Then you've got Lachlan, head of performance. You've got people there and his crew who they've been there for a long time, and they're still the same people. They've still got the same benchmarks. They still they're not stale. They've grown, and you can see it. So personality might change here, but their commitment to what has to be done and the importance and realization they have upon everyone integrating well hasn't changed. That's that culture.
it says a lot about the coaches and the culture that was ingrained in Manly, and the ability for Des to go to the Bulldogs, then win a premiership in 2012. And then, obviously you weren't, you and Jeff were on pretty good terms. You were roommates at the time, so you guys had a really good connection as it is.
Yeah, until he became head coach, and then he moved upstairs in the elevator, and I stayed down there. Actually, too, he don't like to be on his own. He'd wander around the hotel. He was always looking for friends. Look, it's look, Des, that's what he is. He's a very complete, holistic coach, and the biggest shift I saw in him was he really took an active interest in learning more and more and more about the men. Mm-hmm. Whereas some coaches, a lot of what we looked at, or a lot of what they talk about with Des, they say, oh, he's off here looking at all these amazing things. But every single sort of thing that he was looking at was just trying to get the best of the essence of the man, even mentally. We had like Johnny Novak come in, who specializes in, helping people get the best out of themselves. And Des has always been a big believer in that mental aspect. That was one of our arguments, actually. Well, not arguments, but that's where we used to challenge. I would always say to him, sometimes, why can't these players just be like us? We turn up every day. All your coaches, win or lose, we do this and do this. I answer my own question, because we don't deplete like they do every day. When a player comes in, he depletes everything he's got. Even the female players now in the female comp, you're not going to get through a training day without depleting systems, which leads to fatigue. So we get better and better at recovery. And that was another area that Des wanted us to really pull apart and investigate. Yeah.
And you look at what happened with Tom Trebojevic and Jake last year too, when Des was ultimately axed. The amount of the strength of the relationship there it really shows, doesn't it? When through the amount of time that you guys have been at the club, 2 decades, even the new crop of players, and we see the Trebojevic brothers, the uproar that came after that when Des was ultimately axed. But yeah, we actually had John Novak on the podcast.
Johnny, great.
And we learned a lot about the psychology behind sport as well, and how you get these elite athletes to focus on simple things. He was talking about James Magnuson, the swimmer, and how he would just focus on one thing, that self-talk, and he talked to himself about one critical technique that would enable him to just add that 1% on every swim he did. Was there anything in particular that any players that in the team in particular that you kind of you worked with Johnny to impart some form of psychological processes to help them compartmentalize their own performance?
Look, we always worked with Johnny, because I always counted Johnny as part of the performance unit. Yep. So whilst his work might be dealing with individuals, there were key concepts, cues, and he'd share those with us. And so when we wanted to get the best out of somebody, or we're looking at them, they might have shared something with John around a space, and then rather than John having to disclose any of that to us, John would come up with cues and words, and so we would be able to use those. So the answer is, we work together very closely in trying to get the best out of our men. But at the same time, I think John's success was that John understood the importance and the difference of physiological fitness and against the mental. Related, yes. Integrated, very. But, isolated in terms of development, very much so. And so I think that's why, we talk about coaches, lanes, crossing, sharing, upskilling, multi-skilling and learning. But at the end of the day, all coaches, they will have a specialty, and then we can take and borrow and give and share. But at the end of the day, the coach that's in that lane gets the last say. So yeah, working with John has always been a pleasure, and working around athletes' mindset.
You talk a lot about different players that, like in the podcast I've listened to, Matt Orford, the Ox, being one of the strongest players that you've ever coached.
Absolutely. You know, the thing is, like, you know, his feats in the gym, like he would have been 86 kilo or something. He benched 150, 155. Yeah, that's just enormous. That's enormous for him, for his size. He won. But the thing is, a lot of people underestimate. I mean, all the players I've ever worked with, they were tough. They were tough. But I'll never forget. One day we're out there behind the line defending our line, and I was the orange. I ran on there for 13 seasons. Right behind that line through grand finals and everything. And I remember coming out, and he's come off this line, and he's just got whacked. And I heard from where I was about 12 meters back, I heard it. And when I went out there, he couldn't get up, but we got him up, and he had to get back in that defensive line on our own goal line. And I could hear him wheezing, trying to breathe. And if any of us have ever been winded, try it.
It hurts,
It hurt, man. And not only that, you're incapacitated.
Yeah.
So not only that, but it was his rib, and he's trying to move back to the line, and he's going, and he turns around. Well, we've got back to the line, and like any smart team would, where's that trainer? Where's he standing? We go in there, and they've come straight in there. He's just turned around and just made that next tackle and just cleaned him up, And to me, watching that and feeling that, it was very natural, like it was a response from him. But man, it was tough. It was just tough, And that's probably one of the, Matty had lots of great moments, but that's one in particular.
Yeah.
Because man, when they hit him, I could feel it. Like he was a tough guy, and we had lots of guys that we had to almost put a lead on to contain them, with just that natural, and they were tough not because they enjoyed violence or they were pugilists or anything like that. They were tough because they loved the contest. They loved Stevie Matai loved the contest. That's why he would get out and whack people.
Or George Tafua.
Or George. But but then you'd see them. The people they were whacking, they were all friends. They were all, because there was never malice. Never malice. It was just on, mate. It was just like, let's test each other.
I think one of my favorite hits was the one Matt I put on. I think it was Josh Starling, the Rabbitohs, where he launched himself out of the mill and smashed him. But I think Matt Orford had a fair few broken ribs as well. He was very heavily padded around that area, which
Matty's now back involved with the juniors at Manly, which is fantastic for them.
Yeah. I think Matt Ballin was doing a bit of that as well, wasn't he?
Matt Ballin did a lot of that. He did a lot of that for a few years.
Workers.
Yeah, he was fantastic. And then NRL, until we left lockdown in the COVID. And then he stayed up in Brisbane, and then he went. But we've got quite a few players, Brett Stewart, guys who are just lending that excellence back in, and it really it saves you a lot of ground when you've actually got fibre there teaching.
So Darren's actually asked one of the, so we put up a little bit of a Q&A. I do this every week before, and we get one question today from Darren. He sent me a DM. He asked, who is the strongest at Manly? So I guess in that sense, he's asking outside of Matt Orford in the current era. I guess Martin Tapau's now moved on to the Broncos, but from my own understanding, he's really big deadlift. But who else would you say is in that caliber? And that could even, Donny, that could even be from a psychological standpoint. You work with John Novak, like players that can just turn around and keep going, when they're spent.
Look, when it comes to the physicality, I mean, we've got a great strength and performance guys there now. We got Andrew Berridge down there, and we brought him in last year, and he stayed on with Siebes, and we've got Sam Pavan down there too. But the thing with Berridge is that he's a really intense lifter, and he's been able to, like, he's got guys like Saab, who were struggling on the hundreds and that, and he's a big long thing. They're whacking 130s now on their bench press. I actually am a little bit disconnected there in terms of strength. So because you're right, Marty was my last group. Mentally I'm always, he cops it a bit now and then, but DCE, sorry?
Pound for pound, DCE, did you say?
Yeah, no. But when it comes to when it comes to tackling, yeah, and mental, yeah. Pound for pound in there, geez, now you've really got my mind racing. But you know, I mean, look, when it comes to like overall strength and that, if you're talking about speed and power production, you know, you're gonna have guys like, if there's running speed, obviously you got your Saabs, Tolus.
Yeah.
Tolu's an all-rounder, very strong body, strong power, strong, you know, high speed. Garrick would be like, there's only probably a few athletes that I look at in my whole career who have really tenacious robustness about them, and Garrick comes into that. Garrick can run, you know, over 10 meters per second. Garrick lifts. He's you know, he's very disciplined. He knows his football. He works hard on his contact. He's a great person at training. So he falls into one of those, like a Matty Ballin to me. He's just really disciplined, applies his craft, knows what needs to be done, and goes and does it. Yeah. But when it comes to actual strength, you know, you've got that the mighty Pasika sitting in there, and he's a very strong individual. The one that I like to get them on is body weight, because I've always been a big body weight man. Yeah. So I got them their own chin bar. But for a long time, I was the only one who got on it, you know, because no one else could reach it. I'd have to climb up there with a ladder almost. But that was for Saab, Homole, and Pasika, because that was the only one where they could actually fully hang. Otherwise, you know. But no, strength wise, yeah, you probably threw me when you said Marty, because at the time Marty was the big bencher. After that, I'd probably have to go to Pasika, who was a big body, but he's got no body fat, and he's very strong.
Yep. And Ches is more of a psychological strength character.
Ches, you know what? Ches is very fit, and of course
he's heard that with the beat.
Yeah, oh, he's very fit, and so when you look at Croker and Ches, you know, running around the middle, and Tom, you know, they've got great yo-yos, you know, and especially for Croker and Ches, you got to need those, because you know you're making decisions. You know, Foz was in there. Who's playing in there now with them? Just forgot there for a second.
Schuster's injured.
Well, Shuey, Shuey will be fine. Shuey's just young. Shuey's young, and he's still shedding. And you know, and Shuey's got enough football smarts and tactical about him to survive a bit longer, and until everything else connects and gets into place. But immaturity is something you can't rush, and I don't mean immaturity in a negative sense. I mean it as in an actual biological sense. So yeah, you just got to be patient with him, and he'll be fine. But when it comes to those yo-yos and that, you know, Croker and Ches, they just smash those up, because they're the thinkers. They've got to be operating at that high. Yeah.
And operating under fatigue as well. Something that
under fatigue, yeah.
You know, when they go to stress them, they go to that dark place, and then you throw, you make them 100%. Make decisions. Yeah. And
you know, and they're the guys that bring you out. You know, so you just got to stay there till they come up with a plan. So you got to be, they've got to have a bit more. Yeah. But I've never been in a game where, even if it looked like we were doing silly things or we made mistakes, but I've never been in a game where we got in trouble and Ches didn't try to take us out by leading. And yeah, it might be a mistake, we take a kick, but it's all because of his intention and his pure effort to just get us out of there. But then you watch, you know, any mistake made, he'll be the first one to get around there and try and make amends for it. And you just can't ask for more than that. That's why Queensland are lucky to have him as a skipper. And you know, people can say anything to me, but sometimes they forget who they're talking to, you know. And I've had a lot of years with him. He's mentally tough fella.
Aside from like the strongest players, in terms of, you know, there's a lot now about, I'm sure back when you started there wasn't as much social media, but now there's a lot of, you know, everyone's on their phones. There's a lot more scrutiny around their involvement in the public realm. Yeah. So players' egos, managing their egos, but also, you know, when a player comes in and they've got a lot of flair, you know, in a sport where, you know, particularly like you look at Melbourne and their structures and systems, it's very, at points it can be very robotic. And, you know, a sport where we kind of coach that creativity out of the players. How have you, I know your role's more from a, you know, fitness and strength and conditioning perspective, but how have you managed players in terms of their creativity, their egos, and making sure that that's in check. You know, they're able to.
Yeah. Yeah, look, no, look, that is our department, and what happens is we create systems, processes, and an environment where you're always accountable, where you're always being checked on 1%ers, where behavior is noticed, where you know, how you apply yourself to something, how you complete something. So all those little things adding up, it's quite intense. It's quite a tight, you know, the amount of times where I know the players have just wanted to either string me up or say something to me, but at the end of the day, you know, all those things that you described, right? If you they only come to the fore, and they're only flamboyant when they're permitted to be. And so when you come into a good training ethos, you know, this is what we do here. And it's a bit like, you know what I love? I'm a big fan of Goggins, you know, old David Goggins. And what I love about him, he's such an unprepared bugger. You know, he's just, you know, that's the crazy bit about it. He goes out and does shit, you know, and he's not even prepared for it. So above and beyond that, but he comes up with this really great thing, and I like to think about this when I look at my men, and we've used this on game days with some players before. And what I like to do is, you know, so if we take someone like a just grab like a Ruben Garrick, right, and then when we're just moving around, that's Ruben. And when it's business time, that's Garrick. Game day, it's Garrick. After the game, when you want to recover and relax, it's Ruben. And you know, and he uses that as an example of something that he does, and it just really stuck with me after he said that. So the answer to your question is, when somebody comes in, like I said earlier in the talk, they're joining somewhere, and you've got to be really, really, really adamant about, you are here joining us. We're not here to learn, to get culture from you, my friend. You are here, you come here. This is how we do it. This is when we do it. This is why we do it. This is how often we do it, and you will do it. And even though that sounds regimented without much flexibility, there's a lot of flexibility in there, because when you have somebody inside, the only time you should be offering up suggestions, offering up change, is when you're doing the actual fucking thing first. Don't be going halfway in and then trying to ask me about why you shouldn't do the other half. That's not going to cut it. So everybody comes in, everybody joins, everybody does it. And then, like your Ruben Garricks and your DCEs, and you know, and the more you put in, the more right you get to offer and challenge. But if you're just mucking around at the top,
Yeah,
you know, and you're just dipping your feet and you know, pretty much only doing what's asked, if you're that guy that only goes to where you have to go or what you're asked to do, you're never going to get a seat at the table. You don't get a fucking seat at the table, mate.
yeah.
And that's
Do you
bottom
think
line.
those expectations, Donny, there, and making people go above and beyond and really live up to the culture that you're trying to breed at Manly, was made easier by having all those ex-clubmen around that had, you know, bled for the club? You got your Randalls, Monaghan, Cleo, Matty Ballin, which we talked about, so obviously left now to Broncos.
Yeah.
But do you think that all those eyes on you, that expectation, knowing that the caliber of athlete that you're in the presence of is kind of makes these athletes
100%, 100%, and then you've got, you know, then you've got players on the outside who are still involved with the club. And here's the thing: when you look at them, they're champions. You know, we used to do all our wrestling. I don't know. I don't think they do it anymore. But we had a big dojo at the Academy of Sport, and up on the wall were all the flags, right back from 1950 with Bozo, when Bozo was playing, all the way through to the last one that we got in 2011. And I remember, you know, standing there while we were working through these drills, and I just wasn't happy with the drills, you know. And I said to them, let's get this done. We want to get this, and we're working around this. And it just wasn't clicking. So in the end, I just stopped them and I just said, hey, have a look up on the wall. Have a look. And they look up there, and there's two of those teams where some of the staff are still here. and one of the players, two of the players actually, Foz had just come. But, and I said to them, good enough for them. Good enough for them.
Yeah.
And that's all you have to say. And you know what? Did they get shitty? No, they smiled. They loved it. They sort of like, yeah, he's right. He's right. He's right. And off they went, did a lot better. So the answer to your question is having that type of influence, that fiber where winners, people who you could look at and know have felt like you feel, worked as hard as you're working. That brings a lot to a place.
And so, Donny, we talked a lot about at the start a bit about things that have changed in the time that you've been there. But you talked with TK on his podcast a bit about the volume of work that you're putting through the players back then in the early days and the road runs they were doing. Since then, the game's got so much harder and faster. Bodies getting bigger. The collisions are getting bigger. How have you learned through your time how things have changed and how you've had to adapt? Obviously, there's a lot's changed around the technology with GPS units and the speed at which you can get data in real time. And which we talked about with Liz Marin about that and how much more quick and effective it is to get this data and be able to make split-second decisions on the spot about whether to pull someone out of a certain drill or get them to push a bit harder.
And look, we don't really pull people out of drills. What Liz would have been referring to there was more about if somebody is at risk. It might be a Tommy where we're looking for a particular load or volume on the hamstrings, and then we say let's try and stay away from these types of exhales after a certain time. Then we're going in there and doing that.
Put something more appropriate in place that they can do.
100%, and even more importantly, let's get the important stuff done if we've got enough for that. But what you're talking about there is, we always good performance units are built for training blocks. The game looks after itself. The game's got nothing to do with us. All we do in the game is get the athlete ready, get them primed, physically primed, mentally primed, go do your work. All your perfectionism, all your rationale, leave that at home. It's not needed here. I just need you to be you and play footy. But the day before, you had rational and perfectionism right up your ass all the way. Day before, absolutely. But on game day, it's gone. Weigh in, do your hydration, get yourself strapped, take your time, get your mind on, go and see the coach, but don't be thinking about stats and G-forces and meters per second. Don't worry about that. And so as we got to the weeks in training, right, it's all about when can we get the player back and put more into him? When can we get more in? So the biggest thing for me, the biggest changes that I saw was definitely the biggest advantages was the live measurement data, GPS, polar. So I'm knowing where they are at any time and I can get enough into them in the day. And right then, if I can see it's not enough, I can take them there. And if I can see it's just a bit much because I know where they're going tomorrow, I can pull them back. But reading bodies and then putting it to the data, but then checking with the athlete. That's why a lot of people underrate RPEs. But there's nothing better than we used to set up drills, or I would set up a drill and then turn the screen off. And on the screen you'd have all the heart rates and that, so that they knew exactly right. But what I would do is turn that off and I would say, let's go, everybody into 85. When everyone's in 85, I'll start the drill, So they're pumping. I know Tom and Ciro, Robert, they're going to get in there. They're going to get in there within seconds. Boom, and they'll be hitting it. But I'm looking over here. I know Big Homole, Pasika, Sibley. I know they're going to take longer, so I'll wait. But I know. But when I see it, right, then I'll flick the screen on. The thing is, I want them to feel it without looking at the screen. Like. So I'll say, where do you think we are? And they'll go, oh, and then I go, click. Suddenly they see they're all in the red. You're all working. Some of you are above it. So the more I can have my athlete feel, understand, and relate his effort to that, then when we call for it and ask for it, he actually has a good idea about how hard it should feel while they're working, So that's been the biggest change, the biggest advantage, I believe, for me. other successful teams may find something else, but definitely life. Now, remember, I call it measurement. So I'm measuring what I'm doing. I'm not setting the threshold at that. What I'm doing is going places and then looking at the measurement, not the other way around. Yeah. But when we look at long plans, when we look at accumulated fatigue, when we look at things like saliva testing and hormone testing, and we're looking to see indicators of fatigue and illness, or whether somebody's immune system is up, those are a bit different. But at the end of the day, when it comes to just looking at acute or chronic training data, that's still done with what's happening right in front of you, and then you can look at the number. Like, we really only look at the number to make sure we're getting up there. If you're going over it, that's fine. But if you're getting up there, yeah.
Do you think that's another thing that's sort of, they're more accountable to that metric? That's a good thing that's come in with all of this technology now. So for instance, if someone's heart rate variability, and it doesn't match up with their RPE, and maybe their output or their RPE seems to be higher, but their heart rate is higher at the same time, getting an indication of whether they're fatigued or, their risk of injury, has that made them more accountable to the training cohort?
I think it hasn't made them more accountable, but it definitely made the staff more accountable.
Right.
Because we actually know what's happening. What it has made is that it's probably made the athlete more knowledgeable, because what we do then, especially with athletes with families, we know that the more we educate them about well-being and wellness, we know that they can pass that immediately on to the wife and kids, and they can see things there in family. So they know we're doing the measurement, but we don't bother dissecting the empirical or the empirical sciences about it. But we do say that there will cause you to feel this way, and this here will help you, contra that feeling. So we give them, it's all with athletes, rather than try and disrupt their intellect and have them thinking about clutter. We like to put actions in place and strategies so that they can use those to cope with the feelings and the physical anxieties that they may feel. Yeah.
And so what about player welfare as well? I know there's a lot of screening tools now. We talked to, when I was at the start of the podcast, we had a gentleman called Trevor Bailey, who played way back a long time ago, so way out of his era now. But he was talking about how back in the day, there was nothing like that. They didn't even consider their psychological well-being. It was all just about drilling them physically. If you showed any weakness, you were basically,
it's very militant.
Yeah. So, how's that obviously changed now? We look at the HIA and Kalen Ponga and guys like this who are, the collisions are getting harder. They're having more head knocks and concussions, and things are really changing in that department, aren't they?
Look, a lot of that can be related to good training practice, because, when they're getting head knocks, if it's a technical aspect, usually you're starting to lose technical competency when you get fatigued. So there's a tremendous amount around the importance of having really fit individuals, so that you do have more capacity to get more work done without hitting those fatigue levels where cognitively or neurologically you're going to be affected. Your vasomotor skills and things like that. However, in the same vein, that whole big window of injury. Like we used to do that with guys who got suspended for high tackles. They would spend, they get harsher training because they weren't playing. They get more volume, but they would also get really specific agility, speed, accel, decel drills, because we know that's why they did that, because they couldn't get across there. They couldn't take the extra step. They weren't quick enough. They didn't react fast enough. So they just stuck their arm out. So we quickly learned, we're going to hurt you, we're going to get you there, we're going to get you under fatigue, but now we're going to also help you with those motor skills, with that spacing, that response. So when you're talking about, these players and how they, I suppose, how they're treated around those types of injuries and the concussions and that. It's about obviously the welfare, but it's even more so for us about the longevity of that athlete. And that sounds a little bit callous, but that's one of the main reasons why learning about these sciences is so positive and good. Not only is it healthier for the athlete, but that athlete as an investment within that playing group, you can get more out of that athlete for longer. And the only way you're really going to get that is if they're healthy and well. So it's probably a really positive double-edged sword. Yeah.
So players now, they seem to be coping with the training stimulus better. You know, if they're injured, they'll try to hide it. They want to stay on the park as much as possible. What in that department, how have you kind of influenced players obviously with the data and the way you're able to interpret that amongst your coaching cohort, influence and impart your knowledge on players to help them make more informed decisions about their own challenges on the field, for instance? So like whether they had a head knock or concussion, or they've got an injury that can jeopardize their performance, say in the finals or big games.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is built during the training week, because you build these relationships with them, and they trust you, and also because they know you and you know them, they know that you know what that game means to them. They know that every game means, one of my greatest threats was to guys who I didn't believe were doing their mark as well, or I would let them know, if I miss something today, it's on you, because you haven't done this, or you haven't put the right number in, or, and then I'd say, see the dugout over there, you go get a pillow, because you could be sitting in there for a very long time. And you just remind them, you give them that future vision of what can happen. So you build these relationships with them, how what that chance of injury is, how long it takes to recover that, the whole process, and they trust you more when you're actually out there working with them on the field, and you say, hey, I can tell by the way you're moving, I can tell you get your running gait's out. And then you can usually say, how's that right, up around your right glute? Oh yeah, it is a bit tight. And the mere fact that you are in the right vicinity and you're talking, and he's thinking, well, they trust you even more. You need to be really on top of your anatomical game and your physiological game. And the people around you, there's sometimes you're always going to get overzealous, passionate staff members or coaches. And people like me, my job is to shut them down. So somebody might say, come out, and you say, you'll be talking to him. Doesn't happen so much now. And someone will come out and go, I'll harden up, and go to walk off. They're the people, you pull them up. You don't do it there, of course, but you say, yeah, mate, you get on with that. Then you just go over there, you grab them and say, hey, mate, don't do that. Don't walk out there and give your totally ignorant opinion on that, because you just set me back where I'm trying to get some information across. You just keep that to yourself, unless you want to go out and run. But me, I never had any problem doing that with any coach anywhere. Never had to do it really. but that's, you've really got to think about the environment where the athlete is, and all that trust banking, man, is massive. Yeah.
And so over time, you've had to develop your understanding around periodization. Would I be correct in saying that? From the early days, you had a really good understanding of physiology and how to manage people, but you really had to learn periodization. So, what does a typical training week kind of look like in under Donny's regime? And how did this change between obviously pre-season and then in season? We know that during that pre-season, we really ramp up the intensity to try and get more adaptation out of your players. And then during season, it's all about recovery. But talk us through that.
Look, as the simplest way to describe it is that, every energy system has a life, and you can deplete it, and then you got to regenerate it. If you deplete it, it can only stay depleted for so long. If that depletion stays for too long, it takes longer to come up. So you got to get those timings right. We also know that in a muscular sense and skeletal sense with the body, you're going to get DOMs and you're going to get, you know, a growth response, but you're going to get some discomfort in that too. So what we do is we literally build all our programming in the preseason around hitting these systems as frequently as we can, but then changing so that another one can get hit and that other one is reloading. Now we can do that 6 days a week because there's no game. Now, when you play a game, every single system will be depleted because they're going to give everything they've got, you know, to be wonderful to get, you know, blood tests of all those Origin players after the speed and of that game, you know, totally unnecessary. So we wouldn't have to do that. But you know, you would see some really big physiological markers shifting from start to finish.
Yeah.
So it's about getting that right. So that's what real periodization is making sure that they ebb and flows and you're getting them to the right place. And then in terms of strength and growth, you know, when you've got these big blocks where you can afford to go heavy, get this adaptation, set them down a bit, then start going again so that you're getting another stimulus and growth. So in the season, obviously the game pops up, but not only the game. In there, now you've got a lot of other mental things occurring because now, you know, now you're getting, there's a lot riding on this game. There's futures, there's positions, you know, where you are on the team. There's finance. There's you know, there's a whole lot of stuff happening on how well you present and play in that game, how well you compete, right? So what happens there is we break the week down, we shorten everything up, but it's intense. So you're still getting 2 or 3 field sessions a week, but your weight sessions might change. So you might only get one big, heavy bang for buck strength session. Then you'll get a nice, hard, heavy power session. So you're hitting both parts of your system in terms of anaerobic, aerobic, phosphate, you know, with the lift, strength, endurance, and power. But then as you get closer to the game, you're starting to finesse, work more on bouts of speed and bouts of neural activity, execution, response, you know, and then you're able to just temper out enough so that those systems are at a good load before you go into the match. So you're never going to deplete anything completely in season because you don't want to take the risk of having to get it to come back up. It takes too long. And like for you and I, so for a layman, anybody just listening who's not an athlete, you go out and train, okay? If you don't eat for 3 hours after it, then obviously it's going to take you a lot longer to come back to normal and feel better, right? But if you have something to eat not long after it, even if it's a little bit just to kick your blood glucose, you're going to find within a couple of hours you're actually back in a good place, yeah. So that's where our recovery methods come in. So we periodize around energy systems, right, and effort and load. And then when we get to the season, we really refine those, keep the intensity high, allow for the mental fatigue, and break down those strength elements to power and really specific ones so that you can get them into the game. Because you got to remember, when you're on the field, you're using accels, decels, using a lot of strength out there too, tackles, wrestling, you know. And then, yeah, so and all that rolls into these weeks, and then you cycle the weeks so that you're looking at how many weeks in a row you're playing, training, you got your GPS, you know, your Ks, you know, your heart rates, you know, your heart rate variabilities, like you said. There's a lot of information that you have, and then you can start literally specifically periodizing for each player. Does that sort of make any sense, or is that
it's really good insight there, Donny. And in my time, I did a bit of work with the Generation Blue Waratahs Youth Performance. And I think a lot of what they were talking about even was, you know, leading into the matches on the weekend, they would kind of ease off the eccentrics. So you see a lot of like box squats or, you know, trap bar deadlifts without the eccentric, lowering the weight to minimize that damage to the muscle. And then you probably see a lot more of that eccentric component during a pre-season when you're trying to load up that muscle on the players, that strength.
Well, the eccentric gives you some good size, you know, because the eccentric is a longer holding of a contraction, you know, through a movement. So once you we pretty much drop the eccentrics pretty much right through the season, but we keep or even increase our power drive and the weight on the clean and the snatch and the pull. However, yeah, we drop off the eccentrics because that's a more taxing type of contraction.
Yeah, it's really interesting insight there, Donny. Like I would talk a lot about hydrotherapy and cryotherapy in previous podcasts, so we won't go too much into that. That's a really deep dive into recovery. But the listeners, if they've listened to the last podcast we did with Troy Jones, should have heard a bit more about that. But let's take a look into your time with New Zealand Rugby League. So 2009, you had the opportunity to, take a chance to represent your heritage, the Kiwis, Maoris, and you had a bit of a funny moment there in your induction when you had to do a bit of a haka, and a bit of embarrassing moment. They thought it was the worst haka they've ever seen.
Yeah, Andy, old Flinty. Yeah, look. Yeah, I was. That was a real honor to be picked up. That was after. I think that might have been my first tour was 2008. Might have been 2008. But yeah, I went on that tour and I had to go early. I had to fly to the UK and set up the training in France and some other places. So I was actually over there on my own, which meant I didn't get to come in with all the other guys. And when you join the national team, you do a haka. So, and I was back in the days of Blair and Benji. And so I had the real, some hardcore guys there with me. Great servants of the game at that time. And so we were in England, and I forget which the field was. Fields are fields now to me, but and they got me and they said, right, you've got to do your haka, and I was on my own, so which is quite embarrassing because the rest of my family, their kapa haka and their tau Māori is absolutely spot on. I'm the only one who's a bit off because I've been here for 30 years. But anyway, no excuses. But so I got out there and they said to me, oh no, he won't have to do it on his own because Flinty's here, and Flint, he was helping us get everything together. Great fellow, went on to have a really great career himself in New Zealand. Anyway, so he jumps in with me, right? So here I am. He's the pasty palm next to me with his shirt off and his undies. There I am with my undies, right? And there's Benji's looking at me just saying, what tribe are you from? Because he doesn't, my arms are going all over the place. And, we do this haka, the boys, and they often like to grab your clothes and run off with them. But I'm such an evil squaring up bastard that they didn't take mine. But or I was just had such a bad rig that they thought get it covered up as fast as possible. One of them. But anyway, those bloody buggers, they voted him one of the best they'd seen, and I was the worst. And to get that, I never told my nephew that he's one of the leaders in kapa haka in New Zealand. So we keep that one a secret.
And so New Zealand holds a lot of importance to you and your family. You grew up in a family of seven kids.
Yeah.
You joined the Royal Navy in 1984 at the ripe old age of 17.
Yeah. I only just turned. Actually, I don't think I was 17 yet, but look, hey, that made me there. I went in there. The whole family, all the males on my side of the family, right up into my generation, have all served. And my older brother, he only just got out. He did about 24 years. I didn't do that many, but my years there, they really did make me. They shaped me. I like to think I was a good bloke with a lot going for me before I joined there, but that really did put a bit of finesse and toughness to me and give me a lot of direction. So, my years there and with those men and women that I served with, and Buck Shalford, who was an All Black at the time, he was one of my PTIs, and so we really, that was a real, probably one of the best foundation pillars of me as a human being.
And you say your father actually served as well. But you testament a lot of the discipline, respect, the strength of character, your work ethic. You testament that to your mother. Your father. She was
Look, Dad just had that about him. Like every time we looked at him, he was a stoic soldier. Dad. Mum was the one who just said, "You are what you are, but be the best at what that is." And and Mum was Māori, Dad was Pākehā, and Mum did the hard yards because Dad was a bit of a warmonger. So if there was a war, he'd take off and get over there. And so love him to bits and love Mum, of course, and Dad loved us, and so did Mum. But Mum was the one who really kept us on the straight and narrow with there's lots of ways you can go, as you know, anyone, not even me as a Māori, but any kids, there's always lots of different ways you can go. But she ruled with a firm hand, but it was fair. And if she got me for nothing, I knew I was going to do something later, so it would all square up. But I lost mum at the beginning of this year, and even up to that day, before that day, we would all gather and laugh and talk about the punishments we deserved and the ones we copped, which we just put in the bank for later. But mum, the way mum lived, the way mum raised us, and obviously dad's just dad's whole presence. But mum was the one that told us, whatever you got to do, be the best at it.
Yeah, it's a really nice tribute, mate. And obviously sad to hear that, but you've obviously got so many great memories of her. In terms of all of these lessons you've learnt through your time in the Navy and with the Sea Eagles, you're now starting to pour all of this into your work, Sport Life Mentor. And which when I look at that and I read your username on Instagram, Sport Life Mentor, it does make sense though, because a lot of what you talk about relates to the concept of managing people or personal development and growth in life. And through sport, a lot of it's based around performance and those key defining markers we're talking about, with a lot of those means of measuring performance through different fitness tests and performance. But you're also now looking at working on mentorship in a variety of different diverse industries. So can you talk to the listeners a little bit more about how that, sport, but also how you're helping manage people in their life too? Because, and as you say, a lot about what you talk about is addressing issues away from the actual field. A lot of the time with rugby league athletes, a lot of what limits their performance on the field happens away from the paddock.
Yeah. Look, just I'll try and keep it short because it's such a deep thing, but I'll try and keep it short. With athletes, it's really simple. I work around a mentoring coaching process because I know what it takes to get there. So as an athlete, if you stand in front of me, I know exactly if you're going to tell me, regardless of what sport, what level you want to go to, I'm the kind of person you're going to have to come across. At some stage, you will meet me in your journey. It just won't look like me, but the demands that are put on you, the accountability, the requirements, and the discipline will be the same as what I know. So I can already sit you down and say, this is where you're going to go, mate. This is what you have to be. This is where you have to go. Do you have that? Let's have a look. And we unpack all of that, A lot of things around athletes is, as I say in my bio, a lot of the things holding them back or interfering with training got nothing to do with training. They're outside of training. But through some little coping strategies and exercises and behaviors, you can get on top of that and then always bring your best to training. So as an athlete, that's what I give to them, how to get through those years, how to prepare, and then how to turn up every day. So I can literally tell you that, because 9 out of 10, you're going to be standing in front of somebody like me. And if you make it to the top, you definitely will be standing in front of someone like me. And then on the other side, what I do is I go into corporations and different organizations, and I literally can demonstrate to them things that have happened with athletes, issues around athletes, things that have held them up to get forward, things that have helped them get forward. And they're sitting there listening to this thinking, that's me. That's me. It's exactly the same. I don't, I say one thing and don't do another. I admit it. I tell myself lies, and I don't know why. I wouldn't hang around with people who tell lies. Why the hell am I telling myself lies? And I'm not doing that. And I keep making grand plans, but the plan's so big I don't even start it. And that's and I don't get feedback, and I just assume everyone's thinking one thing, and I start behaving like that, and then suddenly I'm on the back foot and I'm getting behind. And it works the other way. Yeah. Now I was wondering, so that's why I grabbed that. That's why I can handle that, because I plan that. I do that. Yeah. So recovery over there would also work for me, because it's about mental and relaxing. Decluttering is the same as decluttering here. Saving energy, recovery processes, having energy going home for the athlete so that they can be human beings at home and help because they've got the energy to do so instead of just being spent and deflated. That's exactly the same in corporate. I should be doing that, getting recovery and thinking about being energized when I get home. It's not the end of the day. So all these little things, they combine. And then I go into mindset and how you apply yourself. So the relationship between any form of organization, business, from any tier right up to ownership, and the relationship between athletes coming in as juniors, working through their tiers to get to NRL or elite, all those human elements, all those variables of life, they're the same. They're the same all the way through. So yeah, I've been really fortunate to have good success with people entrusting me with their staff and building that, building that as part of my sort of corporate work.
So you identify, you evolve successful and proven strategies that you've obviously developed throughout
Used with the athletes and coaches, yeah.
to practice self and situational awareness. So can you maybe just provide some simple examples of some teachings that you offer in terms of how, whether they be a real estate agent, a teacher, whatever it be, how they can apply that in their own practice, their own field?
Yeah, look, self-awareness is the biggest one. Human beings are reciprocal. And a lot of people honestly don't take the time, if they're not natural communicators, or they've never worked on it or thought about it, they don't realize they've got no idea how they come across. And that's that self-awareness about how you engage someone, listen to someone, appear to someone, those are big connectors. And people in business, some people will say, everyone just keeps dumping stuff on me. Well, there's something about you that's allowing them to do that. One of the first things that I teach a lot of my guys is, if there's anything happening to you in a place or an environment that you love, then you deserve it, because that's what you're putting out. If there's anything happening to you in your environment or in your life that you don't like, you're giving it permission and you're encouraging it. We need to pull that apart and have a look at it. There ain't no victims here. There's a reason. There's a reason for everything. So the self-awareness is where we look at how you present yourself, your mindfulness, how you act, how you act away from the limelight, and all about you, how you communicate and how you receive communications and how you reciprocate. And then on the situational is, who are you when you're somewhere else? Who are you when you're in environments? Do you know everything about your environment? Can you read the environment? Because that's going to dictate particular behaviors and how they, how you respond to different things. Do you know, can you even read the situations that you're going into? Because it doesn't take long for people to get a feeling whether you're someone that they want to bring in, or someone they want to hold off, or someone that they're not going to let in at all. So even though we talk about situational awareness in as something you usually learned a lot in combative circumstances, but at the end of the day, it's about you, self-awareness, where you are in the moment with other people, and portraying yourself, what they're seeing and what you're giving. And situational is, who are you when you're there? What is that space? What is that place? What is your purpose? And what is the outcome of what you're doing there? And are your behaviors leading you to get that or control a situation? Those are the types of things. I think behind me you can see one of the big ones is conflict that we deal, that I go into. And that's probably one of the more popular ones that I'm doing with a lot of organizations now is the conflict cycle. So they understand, what is conflict? Why does it happen? And now how can I de-escalate, control, recover, and move forward from it? So, and all of them from sport, all of them from experience. Some of it's military, some of it my brother who's also a professional in that field. We work together on that in that space. So I don't use that one at the college yet, but that'll be coming.
I think that interaction you have with Ben Kennedy is a really good example of just being aware, like you were talking about,
100%.
understanding what you want out of your playing cohort, and being able to make the right decision, read the room, read Ben, and understand what you want out of your players, and be able to go, right,
Yeah.
You go home,
What is
rest up.
what is the outcome?
Yeah.
What is the positive outcome we want?
Yeah.
You know, and even Johnny Novak uses a beautiful one that I love, you know, which is the help or hinder. The
Yeah.
next thing I'm going to do, is it going to help or is it going to hinder? You
Yeah.
know?
And so during 2020, coronavirus hit, must have shaken things up a lot for everyone. But in particular, your workplace, you're used to being within arm's reach of your, data analysts, Desi,
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
physio, your sports scientist. Now you're at home, just like we're doing now, Zoom call. You're used to being really hands-on, full of energy, in and around your players. That's obviously changed things a lot when you went, in those early stages when COVID hit. Has this, although this has been a bit of a blemish on the last few years, did this give you a chance to reflect on maybe how your communication strategies are different in your work environment? And has this made you more empathetic when working with other professionals in other industries and what you're teaching?
Yeah, for me, it wasn't that big a transition for me because I've always I believed I've always been good like that anyway. So, um, but what I do get is yes, when we had to start doing a lot of communication through Zooms or making contact, you really had to be mindful of the shape and the language of that conversation. Because whilst we wanted to talk to you about training, where you were, did you get this done? You know, the rowing sets, did we blah, blah, blah. We also had to show you, we understand where you are, how you're feeling, what you're going through, and we are going to come out of this, mate, and we're here. And instead of breaking that all down to split in half, have a nice talk, then a work talk, then a nice talk. Obviously, what I would do is roll it all into one. So the answer to your question is, yeah, you had to have an empathetic edge or understanding of what you were about to say, but at the same time, in order to really help you, I needed you to carry out this particular task, even if you weren't in a mental place to do so, because you might have been thinking, everybody was affected differently. Some of us thought, right, bang, let's get on with it. I was really fortunate that I was part of the original little group that met about the bio controls that we'd have to utilize and build. So I was a part of that process, and then it went on to bigger things, and it got quite involved until it was at national scale, and then we moved the teams. But for us, the skills that I learned the most during that time was definitely clarity around my communication, because those are the little fine skills when we're face to face we don't need, because we have gestures and movements and little irks and you can see them. That also works against you if you're on a screen. So just over the first few weeks, getting used to getting somebody in and sort of getting their buy-in to what you wanted them to do, without alarming them or without making it sound callous, like there was a distance. Actually, that's a good way to describe it. Removing this distance, like you and I are talking now. That's what it was about.
And I think that's the point I'm trying to get at is, when we're communicating over email, it's very easy to get lost in translation.
Yeah.
Think someone's being rude just by what you're reading now. But when you're in an environment like a high performance sport environment, like you are with the Seagulls, and you can see people, you can read their body language, you can see all their emotions, their anger, their tiredness, their stress, their anguish. So, surely that's made you a little bit more empathetic towards those other, I guess with your new career endeavors and trying to educate these other professionals in different environments. I think that probably taught you a lot. Hey.
Yeah, look, obviously it has. And I'm probably like one of those learners who sort of just soaks these things up, and probably until you've sort of listed them out for me there, and then I can look back and think, oh yeah, well, but they are things that I practice and that I do, and I didn't have to do them 3 years ago. Definitely not before COVID. But now that I'm working in that space, you know, they're little skills that, yeah, that you've picked up every day, and now they've become hardwired. It's like part of my hardware now that I'm using. The students, yeah, they're different. Like, as you know, I work with students, and you know, it's interesting you bring that point up, because the face-to-face and hands-on with them is more about mentoring and nurturing and get them to flourish. And then working with the organizations, the first thing they've got to do is understand, where's this guy coming from?
Yeah.
Yeah. Where's he coming from? Because you can very quickly overwhelm them. They're like, geez, man, I just couldn't. Well, he's too much. You got to break it down a bit, and then you got to convince them that, you know, in a positive way, not a negative way, but in a positive way, mate, there's more in you. You need to come up a notch, you know. And if you've got luckily for me, because I've had success in sport and I'm associated with successful people around sport, I get a lot more leeway than, say, other people coming in.
Yep.
Because I've got a proven track record as such. But yeah, no, that's, yeah. If empathy is the word, then yeah, without a doubt.
And you, mate, you copped a bit of scrutiny during that. I tell you what, I'm glad you chopped the bun.
And why was that? Why is that?
I think you look great the way you are, mate.
The bun was a funny story, you know. Des and I, we were in lockdown, and we were up there in Twin Waters, and there was only a player. I think it was who was it? One of the players, Dylan Walker, was giving out haircuts, so we weren't going there. But then eventually, even when it all opened up, you know, we still didn't go out. We pretty much stayed in there, even when the lockdown was down, and just did our work. But my hair just grew. Like, it was like this when I went there, and then just over those months, it just grew, and it was just sticking out everywhere, you know. And I started looking like, you know, a bad version of Einstein, and you know, a not so clever version of Einstein. But anyway, so I went into and I said, "Oh, come on, Leanne, my wife. Yeah, it's time to cut it." So she grabbed it. She goes, "Oh God, there's so much." So she pulled it up and tied the top up, and then she just shaved around it. And she goes, "Just leave it like that for a while." But there's a little bit behind that. The actual bun on top of a Māori's head, is called a tiki tiki, and it actually has a cultural significance. To be honest with you, mine didn't. I didn't do it for that reason. But a lot of the warriors or those who have a strong Māori background and with their you know, with their family and their lineage. So it's, the story is that Maui, who's one of the great demigods of the Māori, who fished the Northern Island, now the sea. When he was a baby, his mother hid him from the enemy, and she cut off her hair and wrapped him up in it to hide him. And so now, if you see that ball on the top of the hair of a Māori, that's the tiki tiki. That's the significance of it. So it's not a man bun to us. Though
this is where the cultural sensitivity is important, isn't it? And understanding.
Well, yeah, it is. But I will freely admit to you, mine the tiki tiki, mine was a man bun.
You look
and
so
an ugly one.
like
and an ugly one. I'll take that one on the chin.
But
yeah, no, I did cop a bit there, mate. We got it sorted out at the end. The club were fantastic. They really stood by me. The media, there was lots of different agendas. I don't blame anyone for anything or hold. It was a tough time for everybody. People really were challenging themselves, their beliefs. The world was in a funny place. I've moved on, and I still stuck to my beliefs, and but I absolutely hold nothing against the fears and beliefs of other people in those times. That's fine. If we've all come out the other end, and we're all better for it in some way. So
yeah, I'm sure it's something the players have had to learn to deal with scrutiny. You know, when you're always in the spotlight in a sport like the NRL, that's, you know, a business, and it's in everyone's face. Yeah. So
well, there's probably something you'll speak about later, where that's where I would have repaid my men, because every single one of my men, you know, sent me a personal message about how they would stand with me behind what my beliefs were, because that was me, and they knew that that I was you know, because I was one of the more senior people involved in the whole protection process of COVID. But the media didn't know that, because, you know, I wouldn't speak to them, but they didn't know that. So a lot of the stuff they were throwing at me it was, but hey, that's done. But the men stood by
they
me.
didn't have much to write about at the time, so they'll probably just
They did mention my hair though.
straws. But
They
let's
did
dive into that. Let's dive into that now, mate. So we're talking about the pillars of success. You got your ebook, and you've talked about you're going to revise that.
Yeah.
Like what you were just talking about there. So, giving up without expecting something in return. We were talking about it before we came on air. I was saying how grateful I am to have you on the podcast, and thanks for giving up your time. And we were saying that it's really appreciative that someone's willing to give their time without asking for something in return. And you say that often, in your own experience, you need to be willing to do that without having any of those expectations.
Yeah, I think people should be grateful, or at least content with the fact that other people are actually interested in them.
Yeah.
And I really think that sometimes, one of the things I used to speak to my players sometimes, and it always happens, they would they get upset about a signing session because it was on an afternoon, and you had to sign all these jerseys, And I would say to them, listen, there's going to come a time. I say, you go out there and talk to ex-players. There's going to come a time, you're not going to be signing anything. Enjoy the moment. Think about each jersey and what that means to whoever's receiving it. And to their credit, a lot of my guys, like, you get your Toms and your Ches and all that. They know what that is. They've been around long enough. Some of the younger ones, which you have to convince them, because they don't feel like they've done enough to sign a jersey. So you're actually saying to them, no, that's for you to sign too. Oh yeah, I haven't done much. And that's a nice humility, that if they can keep that, that's great. But then you're always going to get some, they walk in, I'm tired, I'm fatigued, I've had this, I don't want to do that because you didn't do your recovery properly, but I don't want to do that, and you got to remind them, listen, what that jersey represents is somebody's interest, passion, curiosity, acknowledgement, honoring of you and your club. Enjoy the moment, my friend. Enjoy it. And I like to think that sort of goes in a bit, and they get on with it.
Yeah. So that ebook, you're updating that. Is that something that we can expect in the term, or?
So at the moment, what I do is I work 3 days a week with ESSAM in the college, mentoring the students through a diploma of high performance and business and sports management. I do that 3 days a week, and then I've got my corporate work and my coaching work, which was so that book. I've got so much that has to go in there yet. I've got the ASADA conflict. I've got the tragedies that I suffered with Keith. I've got the changes between the Bulldogs and then coming back to Manly and then coming out of Manly again. We've got COVID and the time of COVID. So I reckon that would take me probably a good 5 weeks to get down. So I'd love to have something, in there without making it too long. Maybe I'll get some feedback from you after how long it is, but trying to get something in there and before the middle of this year or towards the back end of the year. I've been very fortunate. It's actually done really well for me, that book, better than I expected, probably better than I deserved. But I've been really happy with it, with the sales of the book. But
touch on all the important, I guess, points in the ebook to some extent that were relevant to the podcast, but we probably need another podcast to go into even more detail on this. But we've had, 2 hours today, and I think that we could go on and on. You got so many great stories, and there's so much in your career to date that we could talk about. But I just thought before we wrap things up, maybe talk to us a little bit about your role in the sports management diploma. It's got a bit of an emphasis on coaching and athletic performance at ICMS.
Yeah. Look, that's for students who come out and they want a bit of more of a hands-on diploma around sports management with ICMS or with high performance sport. And the beauty of it is they do practical elements on a Monday. They do their lectures in either sports psychology or whatever the sports physiology those subjects are at the time and the high performance. And they also do the business, the founding business subjects for a business degree. And the real winner of that course for me, the reason I'm interested in it is because I get to actually work with these students. I actually get to mentor them on a daily basis. My real target is to have them graduate. So as soon as they come in, and this is something that I definitely brought from my years in the NRL 100%, which was shared with me by the coaches, all the coaches I worked with, and that is even Des's mantra: making better people, making better people. And that's what I do with these students. I look at them and we work just as hard on life skills, discipline skills, getting here and there, making sure that you're looking after your body and your mind so that you can get to the next thing. Asking questions, getting feedback, getting support, not just being on your own, not wandering, not traveling off in this direction because you're not quite sure, like using the resources around you. There's so many living skills that Dave Dennis, the ex Wallaby and ex Waratahs captain, he handles all the coaching technical side, and I handle the high performance side. And it's Mondays is training and lectures, Tuesdays is lectures, and Wednesdays is the specialist coaches come out, whatever sport they are, from kickboxing to volleyball, basketball, soccer, rugby union, rugby league, netball, gymnastics, whatever the sport is, we bring a specialist in and they get to work with them on that day. So not only do they get better at what they're doing and smarter, but they actually get fitter and they get a lot more, an extra hand from their parents on perhaps living skills and how to get through this year. And the whole target is to graduate at the end of the year. So I'm really enjoying that. I think the biggest thing I miss in the NRL is the Monday to Friday kicking asses and just being that guy and discipline and annoying everyone and having everybody just try to avoid me because I'm always asking questions. I'm not big at telling people off, but I'm just really annoying with asking question after question and until it feels like a telling off. So I really miss that. And but I get that with these students. I get to do that. They're adults now. That's the first thing I tell them. You're out of school. It's time that you got the big boys and big girls pants on. Now we're in, and I'm very I'm very close with them, supportive, warm, and at the same time I'm firm with them. If you're not somewhere or you're late, I'm on the phone. Where are you? What are you doing? Boom, boom, boom. The second term has been so much better because they're used to that now and they've picked up some of those skills and getting through their academic studies. But that's what I do miss about the NRL, and I don't miss game day. I'm really happy to get a cup of coffee and sit downstairs and flick the game on now. The stress of the game, I don't miss, because even after 20 seasons, after all those seasons that I did, and even the internationals or whatever, I still get nervous. I still get nervous on game day. So I'd go in and I would put myself in charge of duties that probably other heads of performance would say, what are you doing that for? You're the boss man. And, but I do them because it keeps my mind busy, because I can't stand waiting for warm up to come so I can get involved. And then, it's always a long day for me, so I don't miss the stress of game day, but I really do miss the day-to-day workings of handling those athletes and getting the best out of them and being part of being a conduit, in a really good coaching crew.
I think I saw that with your wife's post on Instagram, you guys having a coffee on a Saturday or a Sunday. She enjoyed the post-rugby league life.
yeah, she was my boss. Well, I do all my studies there, with the Well College Global. So, and I've done some great studies there with in coaching. Which, but just quickly, that's what I did, was because I'm a sports coach. I've got a real manner about me. It's like, do as I say and do it now, and everything's got to work out. Do it wrong, I'll correct you, and we're going to go. But with human coaching and business coaching and personal coaching, you can't be like that, because you can't put people into these times. So I went and did the CCP course, it was coaching and practicals and really upskilled myself, and it's really extended me and pretty much, I must say, it has led to the success of my personal coaching business that I run now.
It's fantastic to hear, Donny. Just want to say thanks for your time today. Before we wrap things up, I just want you to see if you could maybe plug, obviously, your ebook there, which I'm sure I'll take a deeper dive into, give you some feedback for next time. But where can people get that from? Is it just a supplementary resource, part of your courses, or is it something they can buy?
You know, I do have a website which I'm tidying up at the moment, just called donsinge.com,
Yep.
donsinge.com. And I sort of got rid of all my other stuff, and I'm just going to try and work around that. But I can be found at Well College Global. That's the college that I study at, and that's the college where if you go to About Us, I'm in there, and the book is actually in there. So as a staff member and one of their senior coaches, you know, I coach some of their coaches, plus I also do my own coaching. But Well College Global is one place you can find me, and obviously my website, Don Singe, not Donny. I had to grow up. I had to grow up and drop the Donny, you know.
I think you'll always be Donny to a lot of people though. Like
I might put the Oni on front.
Devil
No,
Donny.
listen, I really appreciate your interest in where I am. I do, and thank you very much. It's really gracious that people would be interested in my story and what I'm doing now. But I'm alive and well. I'm thriving, and I'm all the better for being included in all these types of interactions.
All right. For those that are listening, if you want to find more from Donny and his push-up challenge he's doing at the moment on Instagram, you can go to @SportLifeMentor on Instagram, and you'll find a lot more from Don, Oni, the devil. There, 3,000. So what? Talk to us what that is before we go, mate. What is it?
Yeah, look, push-up challenge, like mental health is a big one. That's another podcast for another time. I've done quite a bit in there, but that was the 3,144 with the amount of lives lost to suicide. You know, I think in 2020, and so it really is over 23 days. They come up with a number of push-ups that you have to do, and each number is related to a statistic around that topic. That's why there's specific numbers, and it's really about raising awareness. I really push that by even doing it. It's about you, because that is the first step into helping you with your mental health, or even just helping you with, you know, sorting bits and pieces out in your head and getting some routine. Is doing something for yourself. It honestly is. The whole base of that pyramid is your physical health. And yeah, quick story before we go. Wolfman,
So he's
David Williams put me on to this a couple of years back. He rang me up, right, and he said to me, "Hey, Donny, we're doing a push-up challenge." I said, "Okay." He goes, "Do you want to join?" I said, "Anything for you, mate." And he goes, "Here's this video. You got to get 75 push-ups or something." I said, "Yeah, no problem." Hangs up, right? So I get down and grab the thing, and I get these 75 push-ups out, right? And I send them back to him and says, "How's that, mate?" And he comes back and he goes, you don't have to do them all at once, mate." And I just went, "Oh." And I went, "You never said that." I said, "I thought it was a challenge." And then he explained it. He goes, "Yeah, no, you break them up and you can do them anywhere at any time you want, but you just get them and it keeps you aware and you share that." And I said, "Oh, well, you never said that." I said, "I was getting excited. Tomorrow's was 1:30. I said, "I don't know how I was going to make that, but shit, if everyone else is doing it, I'll give it a crack." But yeah, that's me. That was just my headset at the time. I was like, "Oh."
Mate, I think that's it. I've spoken to you now. We've had Liz Myron, we've had John Novak. I know what Desi's talking about when he wants to get mad nuts on his behind him on his coaching team. I've spoken to all of them, and I can see why we had so much success, mate. It was a pleasure talking to you today, Donny. Absolute pleasure listening to your story, but also getting all your insights. I've learned a lot. No doubt the listeners will too. So thanks again, mate.
No, thank you, Hayden. Thank you very much.